Hey, Jim. Blessed be your name in a land that is plentiful, where the streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name when I'm found in the desert place. Though I walk through the wilderness, blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise you. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be your name when the sun's shining down on me, when the world's all as it should be. Lord, blessed be your name. Blessed be your name on the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering. Blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise you. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. You give and take away. Lord, you give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. You give and take away. You give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name.
Yeah. All right. Anchor for the soul. Happy Wednesday, everybody.
Good, Tyler. Come on, brother.
Anchor for the soul.
Shelter from the storm. The thunder and the lightning can be very frightening. God is in control. Anchor for the soul. Shelter from the storm. Manna in the morning, blessings overflowing, leading us to home. This world is not my home. through each path I take, through each path every day I'm growing. On my way I'm knowing heaven's worth the wait. When the day is gone, when my journey ends, there won't be nothing better than to be together with all my faithful friends. We'll all join in song. Oh, we'll all just sing aloud. Gather round the throne. Gather round the Lord. There'll be no more sorrow. Someday when tomorrow heaven is our home. Anchor for the soul, shelter from the storm. The thunder and the lightning isn't very frightening when God is in control.
Amen, guys. Amen. I got to recruit somebody from the audience. Mr. Donnie, you mind coming up for this one right here?
Let's go. Let's go.
All right, we're going to sing Our God, He is Alive. Our God, He is Alive. All right. You ready?
You want this one, man? I have to.
There is beyond the azure blue a God concealed from human sight. He tinted skies with heavenly hue and framed the world with His great might. There is a God, He is alive. In Him we live and we survive.
From dust our God created man. He is our God,
The great I am. There was a long, long time ago a God whose voice the prophets heard. He is the God that we should know, who speaks from His inspired word. There is a God, He is alive. In Him we live and we survive. From dust our God created man. He is our God, the great I am. Secure His life from mortal mind. God holds a germ within His hand. Though men may search, they cannot find, for God alone does understand. There is a God, He is alive. In Him we live and we survive. From dust our God created man. He is our God, the great I am. Our God who shone upon a tree, a life was willing there to give, that He from sin might set men free, and evermore with Him could live. There is a God, He is alive. In Him we live and we survive. From dust our God created man. He is our God, the great I am. There
is a God. He is alive. In him we live and we survive. From dust our God created man. He is our God, the great I am.
Amen. Yeah, we'll go ahead and be seated. Good job, guys.
Good evening, church. Have some announcements for you. So our Christmas service is coming up. It's going to be held on Sunday, December 23rd. Just testing you. At 10 a.m., regular time, Sunday, December 23rd. Wednesday, December 26th, there won't be a service, so enjoy that time with your family. Sunday, January 13th. For those of you that work in kids ministry in any way, serving and volunteering, whether you're nursery or infant or second through fifth grade, there's going to be on Sunday, January 13th, a volunteers appreciation lunch, and it's going to be here at the church building from noon to 1 p.m. that day. There's going to be a discussion on safety, scheduling, and we're finally going to get our new shirts, which is awesome. And if you have any more questions about that, contact Heather Bradford. This Friday, December 21st, there's a teen Christmas get-together at the Ward's house. There's going to be pizza provided, but for all the teens, please bring a $5 white elephant gift and a side food item. That's going to be at 6:30 p.m. this Friday, and Leslie's going to text out the address to everyone. So some ongoing prayer requests. There's an update on Darlene's brother-in-law, Al. He's now in recovery from his stroke. He is doing better. He's walking, talking, eating, doing better. But keep praying for him. And Darlene's sister, so Al's wife, Darlene's sister's name is Chris. She really appreciates the prayers that everyone has sent their way. So good job with that. And then we have a brother here, as I've mentioned before, who has a mother out in California who was just diagnosed with cancer. They want to keep that private as far as names, but continue to pray for healing for her and for their family. All right. I made myself do a mental note to remember birthdays and anniversaries because I always forget. So got it. So any birthdays we're celebrating this week? All right. It's a busy one. All right. Sir, your name and if you like, how old you are?
Jim.
Okay. Jim. Awesome. Awesome.
I'm Dennis. I've been involved in a lot of our discussion tonight for 63 years.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, so Jim, Dennis, you, sir? Johnny? All right, awesome. Awesome. Cool. Great name. Great name. All right, cool. This is a lot. This is a lot here. So we'll do happy birthday, Jim, Dennis, Johnny, Nathaniel, Justin, Gatlin. All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Jim, Dennis, Johnny, Nathaniel, Justin, Gatlin. Happy birthday to you. All right, anniversaries. Celebrating any? Nope. All right. Kids can go back to their class towards the front of the building and sign in. We'll have a brief fellowship break and enjoy time, and then we'll have a teaching after that.
It's on. Oh, there we go. All right. Great to be together tonight. And the singing was awesome tonight because that was excellent. Thank you so much for the singing up front and as a body. That was really fun. We're going to talk about, as requested last week, the concept of evolution. And I want to just say a couple of things very much in the beginning to kind of get you to think a little bit. And you may already have strong convictions on this or be confused on this. And what we have is, when you consider the theory of evolution, doesn't mean it's a fact, all right? So you hear this, a lot of different things about it. When I was growing up and went through the science stuff at the university and started hearing all these different things, I grew up with a spiritual background, but I really started questioning whether Christianity was true. And one of the big things that really made me think that way was the concept of evolution. And I was in class after class where I listened to the professors speak, and I felt like, man, evolution seems like it definitely happened. But that is a theory. And the reason why I say that is there's no way that anyone can prove whether the earth was created or the earth evolved through all those different things. We can't prove it unless you're really, really, really old. I'm talking about millions and billions of years old. And so we really can't do that because we can't reproduce the exact model of what happened along the way. So the things that I'm going to be sharing with you aren't necessarily an attack on any person's intelligence or anything like that, but some things that help me to understand what I do believe now, and I'll go to that as I speak. And I hope that as you listen to these things, you're going to hear some things that really are going to make you think, wow, that's pretty obvious. But there's a lot of smart people that believe that we evolved, and there's a lot of smart people who believe that we didn't evolve. You have to make up your own mind based on what you hear in science and you know is a fact in science, and then what the scriptures teach, and see how that all mixes together. So hopefully this will make sense to you. I think you'll find it really helpful. We have about 30 to 40 minutes at the most. So I was talking to Allison earlier. I could easily talk for 5 or 6 hours on this topic tonight for all the stuff that I've read. So I'm not going to do that. And so we're going to hit a few simple concepts that I think will really help you in your own mind and also help other people when you come up with this concept. I want to just start with a verse and just listen to it. You don't have to turn to it. Psalm 8 says this, O Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the son of man that you care for him? You made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him ruler over the works of your hands. You put everything under his feet, all flocks and herds and the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. And when you think about God, if God, as I believe, created all this world and made it all come together, he is amazing. And I pray that as you listen to the different things, that'll help you to see not just the concept of evolution, but how amazing our God is and how powerful and intelligent he is to make it all work and fit together. So as we start, I want to ask you a question. What is evolution? And the problem with it, even people ask me, do I believe in evolution? And the answer is yes. Because evolution can mean two different things. First of all, evolution can mean that a change. For example, if you go back and maybe in your science book you saw these moths, that they would change through years and years of time. There was pollution in Europe, and these moths used to have a certain color. They were more light, like white color kind of thing. And then through the years with the smog and everything, the ones that were white got eaten right away by the birds. And so what happened is you ended up with darker colored moths. And so is that evolution? That is. And if you go back and you see horses that through the years and years and the fossils, they changed into different sizes and different things like that. That's evolution. Evolution is a true thing. It does happen. And we can make it happen. So how can I say it's true and not just a theory? That concept of changing inside a species happens to humans. It happens. I used to do genetics experiments and I worked in the lab for a year when I was at school. And we would try to do things like that. We would irradiate fruit flies and all these kind of weird things to them, and they would have all kinds of different things happen to them, and they would change. And so we can prove that evolution does happen to some degree, okay? Now, that's a difference than saying that evolution, as some people say when they believe in evolution, it's the origin of life and all the things that happened at that moment in time. I'm not talking about human life, I'm talking about life, like the first tiny single-celled organism. That happened, and then all the way to where we are right now is also looked at by some as evolution. So it depends on your definition. So when people ask me if I believe in evolution, I say, well, what do you mean by evolution? Whether it's the transition within a species, which I do believe strongly is true, or whether it's the origin of life coming all the way to where we're at right now. Does that make sense? So be clear on that, and this is a way of looking at that. So evolution, the concept that we're going to be talking about tonight, isn't about the transition within a species. That's pretty much true. You can't really argue with that. The question we're going to talk about tonight is a couple points of evolution, meaning that life spontaneously began from no life. That's step one. Step two, that life increases in complexity through frequent and helpful mutations. A mutation is a change in the genetics that allow an organism to change what they are into something else. Mutations do happen. So the concept of evolution believes that through the pressures and environmental things, there's evolution that happens within a species, but they believe even more that there's a concept that mutations produce, with multiple mutations, new organisms. Okay? So the question is, does that happen gradually through time? And then the other part is, again, and this should be verified, just what I was kind of mentioning, gradual changes in the fossil record. So if you wanted to say that is evolution true from the concept of the single-celled organism all the way to where we're at right now, there should be a gradual transition through the fossil record from the amoeba to a sponge or whatever to such and such. I skipped a whole bunch of mutations to get there. Okay, but there's a long pathway to get, and you should be able to follow that along the way and say, hey, that's pretty amazing. Look at this happening in the fossil record. Is that everyone with me on those things? So we're going to talk about that. So you kind of have to know that's the concept that we're talking about. Otherwise, this won't make as much sense. So is everybody with me? Okay. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is this concept of time. Now, and the time aspect is really important. This is a key question in evolution, is that if we have enough time, then anything can happen, basically. So if you come from the standpoint of 0 days when the earth was born, the first beginning, and if we have enough time with mutations and things that happen inside the cell, enough things can happen to get us there. And the question is, do we have enough time for that to happen from basically when the earth began about 4.5 billion years ago to the point we are right now? All right? And those are the questions. Now, so we're going to talk about the first point that I want to talk about, and that is a really, really critical point in evolution. And it's, to me, the easiest point for the person who believes in creation to have a strong argument against the concept of evolution as we're talking about tonight. And that is, how did life begin? There's a famous experiment by a guy named Urey and Miller in 1953. And what they did is they made this container, and they put gases that they thought were probably in the atmosphere at the beginning of the Earth. And why I say probably, because none of us know for sure. But based on what we think about planet formation and those kind of concepts, what gases would be in this environment. And I'm not going to go into all those because it doesn't really matter unless you're really going to study science. So I'm sorry about that, but there are some really great books for you to dig into that, and I'm happy to help direct you, and I use several of those for what we're going to be talking about tonight. But what they did is they hooked this up, and they said, okay, in this early atmosphere there was lightning. And so the lightning would come through there and zap and do all these different things, and this turned, evolution got a huge kick in what it said. These guys created amino acids when that happened. Now, amino acids are the building blocks for proteins. And life is made, you're sitting there made of a whole bunch of proteins. And those amino acids are the forming blocks for a protein. All right? So the amino acids are, without amino acids, you have no protein. Without protein, you have no life. So they shocked this thing over and over again and said, we got amino acids. Therefore, given enough time, we could keep shocking this over and over again. We actually would eventually get enough protein to build an organism. Does that make sense? And that was a very strong belief, and people said, wow, evolution must be true. Now, does that prove evolution? No, not even close to that. But it was tested, it happened, and people got really excited about that. And since then, there's been this concept, enough time, we can make life come out of these amino acids. So let's talk a little bit more about that. There's 20 essential amino acids, meaning in order to form proteins, you need 20 of these amino acids to develop life. And then these experiments that they've done over and over again, they've never been able to produce all 20 of them. All right, so that's a bit of a problem with that theory. We're going to go a little bit further. The problem about that too is proteins are unbelievably complicated. I mean, there's thousands of amino acids in many of the proteins. But let's say there's even 300. Those amino acids have to be exactly in the right position when they come together. And if they don't come to a right position, the protein is not functional. It doesn't work. In hemoglobin, the thing that carries around the oxygen in your body, if one of those amino acids is wrong in thousands of those amino acids, you know what? You have sickle cell. Just one. A lot of times, if one amino acid is wrong, that whole protein is useless. The organism dies. So you're talking about not just being able to build amino acids. You're talking about bringing strings and strings and strings of amino acids together in a perfect formation. If one is out of sequence, it's no good. It doesn't work. So it's a very, very complicated thing to imagine. And you got to think about that. Like, let's say I had 100 blocks up here, and I threw them down together, and they had to line up in exactly one line. You'd think, Chris, that will never happen. It wouldn't. But it's possible. If we had enough time, one time that might happen. And that's what we have to think about. So they're saying, if you have enough time, would that happen? And if you believe that evolution was responsible for creation and just a random, spontaneous thing, that's what you actually believe. That all of a sudden, all at once, there was a point in time when enough of these amino acids were in the right order that they formed enough proteins to work. The smallest conceivable cell, the last I read, the smallest living cell that I read had 300 different proteins in it, okay? And there's varying lengths that are really long. We're going to play around with this a little bit more in just a few minutes. And there's people say maybe we can get it down to 124. Imagine 124 proteins of 300 amino acids. What is the chance of you getting those to line up all at the same time in one small little spot? That's a huge faith step. And what I want to tell you tonight is I have faith that God created the universe. The evolutionists had faith that I think is greater than my faith. But you have to understand that, and you have to think of it. They're not dumb people, okay? So I want to give you some more things. To make matters even harder in amino acids, if you created amino acids in a lab, this is a little bit confusing, but just stick with me. When I look in the mirror, I know it's scary, but when I look in the mirror and I raise my right hand, what does the figure in front of me raise? It's left hand. Every amino acid, when they're made, they have basically mirror images of each other. They're left-handed and right-handed amino acids. They combine together fine, but there's a weird thing that happens in life. They're all left-handed. So those of you left-handed say, see, that's natural, right? But really, the amino acids are the left-handed one, all right? And so those are what compose of life. So naturally, that wouldn't happen on its own. Something had to happen that the left-handed ones would form only life. We don't know what that is, but that's another factor that goes into the spontaneous creation of life from the amino acid perspective. You guys still sticking with me? Questions so far? All right, so we're going to go a little bit further. So to make things even harder, there's 3 more key building blocks we're going to talk about. But first, I want to read, this is a book that I really like a lot. It's called The Creation Evolution Controversy by someone named Weissong. It's an old book, but it's got a lot of really, really neat things in it. And it talks about odds of different things. And one of the odds I want to give you, just as a number that I read, and again, I am not a statistician, that is not what I do, but one of the people said that we would typically consider something impossible when it was 1 in 10 to the 50th power. All right? Now, that's not a fact. That's just a concept, but just take that number. So if something's greater than 1 in 10 to the 50th power, you're talking about it's so unbelievable real. It's basically impossible, okay? So we're going to play with some numbers to hopefully make this stuff really clear. So we're going to talk about the proteins and the amino acids first. So we're going to play a game here just a little bit, and let me see if I can do this. So this person did some statistics. He's smarter than me about this area. So he says, what is the probability of forming 124, the smallest amino acid, smallest protein number they can come up with in a single cell, that would have specifically sequenced 400 amino acids? And then they said, okay, what if, and he's going further. Okay, so take that same question, but you give it enough time, you give it 10 billion years. And you take every molecule in the oceans and you turn them into amino acids. So you filled the ocean, not with water, amino acids, just deep amino acids. And you allowed every one of these amino acids to link up in sets of 124 proteins every second for 10 billion years. What would be the odds of this happening one time? And that would be 1 in 10 to the 59th power. But to make matters harder, what if you said, okay, we're going to turn these, we're going to have the L kind only. And then he says, okay, that's going to make it harder. So he goes on and it goes, what would be the probability of forming these 124 proteins? And you said the number of, or estimated the number of Earths that, planets like, not like Earth, but planets in the universe is estimated to be 10 to the 20th power. So they said, let's take 10 to the 31st power of Earths in the whole universe. And you had them link together every second. What would the possibility of ever getting these 124 proteins? So what they're saying is, you made all the Earths, 10 to the 31st Earths in the universe, and you filled them with amino acids, and you had them link every second for 10 billion years. What's the odds of this happening? 1 in 10 to the 64,390. Now that's faith, but it gets bigger. All right, so we're going to come back to that in a few more minutes. So that's just amino acids. There's 4 essential building blocks in life, okay? And there's more than that, but we're going to use 4. All right, and the second one is what we call nucleic acids. It's what makes DNA. Without DNA, the ability to reproduce, the ability to code, to direct the things going on in the cell, you would not be able to have life. And DNA is much more complicated. Let me tell you how complicated DNA is. If you took, let's say Donnie, he was up here singing. Let's say you took all the DNA out of Donnie. You know what? It would all fit into one ice cube. One ice cube is Donnie's DNA. But in that DNA is the information that's equivalent to 1,600-page textbooks. All right? 1,600-page textbooks. And if you lined up those DNA end to end, and they put them in a long line, that line would go all the way from the earth to the sun, 400 times and back. Okay? That's just Donnie. So think about that. That's a lot of stuff and a lot of information in your body sitting there that's coded into you. And it has to be exactly specific, because if it's in the wrong order, the organism dies. So they said, let's make this as simple as we can. Let's take the smallest thing that we can, the smallest DNA volume that we can possibly come up with, and let's mix them together. And let's put them together and link them every second and do all these different things that we just talked about. And the odds goes on to pretty high numbers. So we just have 2 of the components right here, and I'm not finding my page. Come on, Chris. Anyway, I think it's 1 in 10 to 167,000, or a little bit more. Yeah, it's 1 in 10 to 167,626. So the question is that likely? It gets more complicated. So in order to have nucleic acids together, which are the DNA building blocks, amino acids together, you still have to have carbohydrates. Everything, we all love carbohydrates, right? You have to have those for life. That's essential. So knowing that you have to have those for life is why we like to eat them so much, right? But it's interesting to know that the atmosphere that is required to produce carbohydrates is the opposite atmosphere that's required to produce proteins. So that creates a problem. They actually have, with certain experiments and certain conditions, put certain gases into a container and shocked it over and over, and they produced some nucleic acids. And they actually do the same with carbohydrate. But their problem is they're opposite atmospheres, so they don't really fit together. So that's a big problem to come up with, say, how do we make this atmosphere work with this atmosphere when they make two different things and mix them together? That changes the atmosphere. So we got a lot of problems with this concept. We're not talking about anything living. We're just talking about putting all the pieces in one pocket. Okay? Now, I don't have any more calculations that it's not necessary, actually, but carbohydrates would have to be added in there, and they are complicated organic structures also. Okay? And then the other problem is lipids, the fats that makes things taste really good. All right? Like bacon, that's what you like about it. Fat is essential for life, believe it or not. But sometimes we have extra, which we don't need, but that's the way it is. But no atmospheric conditions have ever been able to produce lipids in this manner. So we have another problem. So you have to think about this. Not only do these have to come together in sufficient quantity to happen spontaneously all at one time, they have to be contained in some kind of envelope so they stick together. And that has to happen spontaneously at the same time. Now, I believe in the concept of evolution producing change. I don't believe in evolution producing magic, okay? Because this would be magic to make that happen. And it's really important that when you step back and think about that, the creationists, people, the evolutionists who believe in this spontaneous creation are not dumb people. They're smart people. And they'll find some ways, I'm sure, to argue this. But if they're honest, they have to say this is exceedingly impossible. And you have to have a significant amount of faith to believe that that happens. So the question is what you have faith in. If you have faith in nothing or faith in a God, which one is weaker of a stance, in my opinion, for the creation of life? And so when you step back and look at that, it's pretty amazing. That's the first thing I want to tell you about creation of life. It's way more complicated than that, and we could talk about that for a really long time. But that's a step that someone has to have a huge step of faith in. And I actually think they have stronger faith than me if they truly believe that that happened without any intervention. Okay? So that's why, for me, one of the reasons when I started getting this information, I said, no, I'm not throwing my brain away. I actually am using more, to me it seems more probable that God would be there. Number two, I want to talk about time. Because time is a critical thing in this story. There's a couple of important concepts of time. The first one I want to talk about is just some estimated ages of the universe. The estimated age of the universe is around 13.5 billion years, give or take a billion. It's not really super accurate. We don't know. No one was alive then. And so it's hard to tell. The age of our Earth is estimated to be around 4.5 billion years. Okay? Life was first noted in the fossil record about 3.5 billion years ago. All right. And interestingly, that corresponds to the time when water appeared on the earth. So what happened is water came, and then there was life in the water of single-celled animals that we can find these fossils, these microfossils, which is really amazing because you got to think about it. The first billion years, there was all these different things happening that were bad, and environmentally things were bombarding the earth. It was coalescing. A lot of things were happening. It would have been really, really hard for life to become stable enough. There was no stability in the earth at that time. And so you have to think, how fast did these cells have to come together to all of a sudden water appears and the cells are there? So the fossil record doesn't show any gradual thing there. It's a sudden, abrupt appearance of multiple different single-celled organisms. Pretty interesting how that happened. It wasn't actually gradual. It was a flurry right at one time. All right? Then, basically, weird thing happened. About 3 billion years took before there was a significant change. And then we have something called the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian it's a series of times. It's an age, the Cambrian age and things like that. And what happened is, at that point in time in the fossil record, all of a sudden a huge explosion of life occurred. And that means, a phyla, basically, the name I'm going to use the phyla, it's basically a body type. There's basically about 34 different body types. And that happened all at once in the fossil record, all kinds of them. Boom. One day, none. Next, one level, none. And then the next level, there was so many of them. It was amazing. Now, that's really important. And we'll come back to that, but I'm just trying to give you some times of that. That was about 530 million years ago. Okay? Now, another step forward time, Neanderthal man, or man, I don't know if that's the right term, but Neanderthal was around 150,000 years ago. People used to say that we evolved from Neanderthal. The evidence is now pretty much against that. Genetically, we more likely evolved from Cro-Magnon man, if we evolved from any of those, and that's about 50,000 years ago, all right, when they have first appeared. The first, where we saw more agriculture and more and making pottery and doing things and paintings happened in was about 10,000 years ago, okay? So these dates are going to change as things get uncovered, but I'm just trying to give you a history of time in general as we think about time. So one of the things you want to ask is this that I'm telling you, does this make sense with a gradual transition of things, just as you're thinking about it, okay? We're going to go into that a lot more in just a minute. Now I want to talk to you about time from the biblical perspective. Does the Bible tell us what time the earth began? The answer is no. As a matter of fact, I want you to turn to Genesis 1. It doesn't say. It makes an assumption right in the beginning. All right? By the way, this is how you know God's a baseball fan. Because it says, in the beginning. I know it's not a very good joke, but big inning baseball, you know. All right, bad. All right, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. How long did that take? It doesn't even give a clue. We have no idea. It doesn't say, it doesn't try to say. What's Moses going to say? That was 4.5 billion years ago? No. I mean, really. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. So it right there goes to when the water was on the earth, which as far as we know, that was 1 billion years after the earth was established. But it doesn't say anything more than that. So people will take this so many different ways. 1 billion years in one sentence of earth. And if you look at it another way, 10 billion years in the beginning of time, in creating the heavens and the universe. So that's a lot of time in one sentence, so he has to leave a lot out, all right? This isn't a science book. Is it consistent with science? Well, I want to bring up a few points that are really helpful. And when you go back and look at the fossil records, some people will come and they make a really big deal about this. Did God create the earth in 6 days, or did he not? And I want to talk a little bit about this because it helps a lot your understanding of evolution, all right? He could have. I believe God has the power to do anything. But the argument against that is a couple of different things. One is this, is that if he did, he created things to look like they were not, like these fossil records, okay? And the different things, the carbon testing, the different things that they use to verify dates and times. And he could do that. God can do whatever he wants. And I think he has the power to do anything. My opinion is that he did not. So how do I square that up with the Bible? Well, interestingly, before the King James book was written, many religious people did not believe that it was a 24-hour period anyway. It's when the King James Bible was written and they said day, that people drew a hard line with that and said that it was a 24-hour period. Interestingly, the word day is the word yom in Hebrew, and yom can mean a day. It can mean a period of time with a beginning and an end. And if you look through the whole Old Testament and you read when the word yom is used, it's used in many different ways. For lengths of time, for 24-hour periods, there's all different kinds of way that it is used. So it's hard to say for sure that means a 24-hour period. And then you say, well, what about morning and evening? He talks about that in the day. Well, interesting, the root words of morning and evening are this. The morning and evening, the root, the root of the word of evening is basically chaos, and the other one is order for morning. So it could easily be, say, a period of time that had a disorganized to an organized, if you use the Hebrew words instead of the English words that they translate them into. So I don't know how long they were. My opinion is that, and this is my opinion, is that God did not create the earth to look like it was old when it wasn't. I think that he didn't. I think we don't have to narrow him down to the English translation of the King James Bible. We can use the Hebrew and use the roots of the word and say, what does he really mean? In my opinion, he means a period of time that had a beginning and an end. which could be from that topic that he's talking about, from order to chaos. Think about, that almost has to be true to some degree because the sun didn't appear till the fourth day. That doesn't mean the sun wasn't in existence until the fourth day. What happens is, if you look at this is told through the eyes of someone living on the planet. And if you look at planetary development, the planet was obscured with clouds and gases. We know that that's part of the development of a planet. And as things change, then the environment around it changes, and different things can cause those to change. So don't get hung up on the 6-day thing. I can't prove it either way, neither can anyone else. Just keep your mind open and keep thinking is why I say that. So the time issue is interesting from the perspective of the evolutionists and from the creationists. Don't get caught up in the battle. No one can prove it. But in my opinion, I think God uses these things around us to teach us more about him. So I'm a believer of the fossil record concept. So here's a key question, and this is the third step I want to talk to you about. Does the Earth, through the fossil record, support which theory? The theory of evolution, that gradual has transitioned through times and millions of years, or does it support the concept of specific steps that go step after step, like Genesis does? All right? By the way, the Genesis order is correct, scientifically. Just that alone should tell you it's a miracle, because Moses would have no idea that that's how it happened. Okay? So Moses didn't have a fossil record to verify it with. So just having it in the correct order of the formation of a planet is stunning, because we didn't know that till too long ago. And we've had a lot of things to study with telescopes, seeing planets develop and die and all these different kind of things. So, so if you look at the fossil record, what you actually see is a sudden eruption of life when water is placed on the earth. Then you see 3 billion years later, another sudden eruption of life, which includes all the phyla, all the different body types. So I wanted to break down a little bit of the fossil record concept and talk a little bit more about that. If mutation was happening to produce this, some people believe that 1 out of 1 million mutations are positive, and the other whole big number is negative. It's hard to know exactly what that really is, even if it's 1 in 10,000 mutations. We know most mutations, at least that we're aware of, are bad. For example, I'll go back to the fruit flies that we did all these things to with chemicals and other things. We never produced a different species, and we never produced a more viable species. They all, by the mutations that we did to them, got worse. Many of them were unable to reproduce, and many of them died. But some of them survived, and different things. And they were trying to map the genetics of these fruit flies. I know, exciting, but that's how you learn about genetics sometimes. So what really happened is, with mutations, you have to figure out there has to be a lot of mutations in order to produce, for example, an eyeball. Think about an eyeball. The single cells didn't have eyes. That's impossible, right? Because it ain't more than a cell to make an eye, okay? They didn't have eyes. So in this explosion called the Cambrian explosion, 5 different phyla developed eyes at the same time through evidently different pathways. The odds figured out to produce an eye by random mutations, and this is really given some really positive steps, I will tell you that, is 1 in 10 to the 170th for 1 phyla to do that. Can you imagine 5 different ones producing exactly a very, very similar, like the octopus eye is a lot like your eye. You know, you look at the octopus, he looks right back at you. All right? He can see you, all right? And those fruit flies, they have eyes too. And they can see you. And even this thing called a trilobite, which is considered a kind of archaic organism, it had an eye. Actually, in some ways more advanced than ours. Pretty cool. Go figure. A little bug more than us, right? But the point about it is it really possible for these organisms, who are all related only through a single-celled organism that had no eye, all develop eyes independent of each other by random spontaneous mutation? It takes at least 1 in 10 to the 170th odds to produce an eyeball through mutation. I don't know what the odds of that at times 5. That's a lot. So does that support the concept of some kind of intervention from some wise being? Or does it really support the concept of spontaneous changes through usually harmful mutations to produce 5 different eyeballs that see amazingly well? Again, I can't prove anything. But again, when it comes to the faith issue, I look at it and think, I don't have that much faith that it spontaneously happened. I think there had to be an intervention by a wise being to make that happen. Every one of these steps supports the concept of creation. Now, it doesn't nullify the other one. There could be actual transitional things that somehow keep getting missed. And if you look at the fossils, once they started in that Cambrian thing, there is evolution inside of those phyla. There is. That does happen. And so you're in science class and you see them saying, look, this creature became this one. They show you the skeleton and say, man, that makes perfect sense. And so when I started hearing those different things, I thought, I can't believe in the creation. Now when I get more facts and look at the other side, I'm like, I can't really believe in the evolution side. I do believe evolution happens. Don't take that wrong. I just don't think it's responsible for the creation of life and the transition of life to different phyla. I don't think it's possible. Could God have done all these things? God uses the world to do lots of things all the time. Think about it. Even punishing, go read the scriptures. It talks about him using earthquakes, all kinds of stuff. So God can do it however he wants. It's his earth. But you really have to have some amazing faith if you believe that life came from the ooze. You know? And that life changed into beings, advanced beings. And we just talked about the eye, but we could do this with every body part that you want to. And again, I do believe evolution does happen. So who was Adam and Eve? I don't know. I don't know exactly how that worked. I don't know if he took a Cro-Magnon man or some derivative of that and then breathed his spirit in them. I don't know. It doesn't say. But that's all I know is where we're at now and what the fossil record shows, and the rest is pure speculation of how God did it. This is why I believe, in a very small nutshell, why I believe that the concept of evolution as far as the creation of life and the production of new phyla and the time that we have available, it would be impossible to follow the evolutionary pattern. There's not enough time for all the mutations. There's just not. It's impossible. There's over 1 million changes from a monkey to a man. And if you take the timeline that would have to, even if you give, even if they reproduce every day and we're able to produce, it still doesn't happen. There's not enough time to make this many changes that we know of unless something totally out of our understanding was happening. But it makes sense that there is an intervention from some other being, which I believe is our God. Okay? So that's my opinion. I want to give you a couple more facts that people are going to ask in just a second. So I'm going to delay. Okay, what about the dinosaurs? Why doesn't God talk about dinosaurs? Why should he? I'm serious. What role do they have on man? They were extinct about 65 million years ago. What would Moses say? That was a big creature. What did he do? Show him a video? Really, actually it does talk about a very large reptile in Genesis, and many people believe that's a dinosaur. Okay, and that's in Genesis, I'm not sure, Genesis 1 or 2. But it doesn't matter. The point is, people say, well, why didn't talk about dinosaurs? Because they were irrelevant to the progression of man on the earth. That story that Genesis has given us is actually telling us how, in a very rapid thing, God developed this relationship with man. It has nothing to do with the rest of the world. He doesn't go into a lot of details. He just gives a brief overview. Think about this. This first 2 chapters covers 14 billion years of time. How much detail can you put in there? It's only relevant to God's relationship with man. That's what this book is about. It is not a science book trying to teach you the dinosaurs came, then they wiped out, and here's what we think happened. We think that after the dinosaurs lived about 150 million years, about 65 million years ago, the reign of the dinosaurs came to a sudden end. There was an asteroid, which is a piece of a supernova, and it was considered to be about 10 kilometers wide, so you're talking about, let's say, 5 miles in diameter. Hit in the Caribbean. It hit with such force that it changed the world. It left, let's see, how big was this? A crater 150 kilometers in diameter and 2 to 3 kilometers deep. It shook the whole earth. There was volcanoes all over the whole earth. There was so much damage and smoke and things that happened that the earth was clouded for years. A half a year later, the temperature was dropped. Life died everywhere. The only mammals that survived were less than 5 pounds. Everything else was killed. Big change. That's what we think happened to the dinosaurs, because they just couldn't survive. The plants died, all different things died, and they couldn't eat. Then there was nothing for the carnivores to eat, and the things that survived were the little critters that didn't need all that much, you know? So you came from one of those little critters, evidently, right? But that's what happened to dinosaurs. So, but again, I bring that up because people always ask, what about the dinosaurs? Well, they're amazing creatures, you know? But other than that, they're irrelevant to man, except they're good for fossil fuels if you drive a car. I'm sorry, but, you know, it's true. Okay. All right, so we have time for a few questions. I know I went through a lot of information. Any questions? Any question is fine. It's not okay. It's okay to ask it. So, yes, Rusty. Okay, first of all, Rusty asked the question, how do I answer questions about Cro-Magnon man and Neanderthal man? And the reality is, I believe that they were real creatures, okay? And they were man-like beings. I do not believe that they were, Neanderthal was a being that led to us based on genetics, not because I know anything about it, just from what I've read about it. We may be related to Cro-Magnon man, and we may not be. It really, that's where evolution comes in, where body types change and things happen. And in my opinion, God either did one or two things. He either used, let's say, this is not a fact, what I'm about to say. He used Cro-Magnon man, and they got to a certain point of development, and he said, all right, it's time for me to make Adam and Eve for whatever reason. He took a Cro-Magnon man, and he made him that. I don't know what he did. I don't know if he did that. But we know that Neanderthal died off for some reason. We don't know exactly why that is. People have theories about that. But how God took us from that point in time, it seems like it might be related to that. But I don't know for sure. Maybe at that point in time, he says, okay, we're ready. I got these two guys, this bit of clay, this is going to be Adam, this bit of clay is Eve, and he made them. I'm not sure. Because we're all basically made of the earth. So how you want to say that? I mean, we die, our body parts, they get dissolved into the earth. That's what we are. Okay? All of us are just clay and water. And then God breathes His Spirit into us. But that's what all happens. Our bodies break down into dust. And so God taking the dust, I don't know what that means for sure. So I don't try to read into it more than it says. I'm not sure. And it also sounds like Adam and Eve were living for a really long time, in my opinion, before they left. So I think they may have had a lot of kids before they left. It doesn't say how many they had. I don't know. Yes, Brian.
On that note of Adam and Eve, obviously there's like a couple sets of 14 generations of possibly 7,000 years ago. The problem is I've been in caves with 30,000-year-old drawings and paintings and seen villages that are 15,000 years old, halfway across the world from there.
Right.
How do you...
Okay, Brian brings up the question is, if you biblically date the Bible by some of the genealogies, you come up with a time shorter than the 30,000 years or whatever it would be. And that may be accurate. Maybe there were people who were human-like that didn't have God's Spirit into them, that were doing things and paintings and things like that. Maybe what God did. Or it also may be that there's, when you read a lot of the genealogies throughout the Bible, when it says so-and-so begat so-and-so in the King James Version, that doesn't mean, and there's many, many cases, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the father of that person. It means it's in the line of that person. So it could be way, way more than that. Some people believe that that's actually just poetic more than anything else. That Genesis isn't a science book, and it's made to say these people, where how many of you can name back 10 generations of your family? You can't, but you might need. I know the Nicholas Stowers came over in the 1600s. I actually don't know anybody in that line until about 200 years ago. That doesn't mean those people didn't exist, but if I was going to list my forefathers, I would list Nicholas, and then I would go to my dad's grandfather. That's the only people that I know of. I know there was more in there, but that doesn't mean they didn't exist. And that's what I believe Genesis was doing. I believe Genesis covers a much longer period than those 2,000 or 3,000 years. I think that that's purely poetic and naming names that are significant names in that lineage, is what I believe. Yes, Adam.
Obviously, it's a very long debated issue, and it can be very easy to get into arguments when you yourself or the person you are talking to don't necessarily know all the facts. And obviously, as you said multiple times, no one knows all the facts about this. Can you talk a little bit about how this matters in terms of salvation and belief for salvation, and
Okay.
how maybe we should be careful in terms of getting too far deep into debating or arguing about this?
Okay, Adam brings up a good question. Let me do it in two different parts. Let's say that I'm a person who believes the earth was created in 6 days, and let's say Tyler over here, he believes the earth was created in 4 billion years. And we both believe that we need to repent and be baptized, make Jesus our Lord, and live our life for him. Does my belief in creation time affect either one of our salvations? The answer is absolutely not. I don't see any scripture that would say that. So I just want to make sure from my perspective that from the science world that I'm being credible before what I see as our facts. And so that's my opinion. But maybe Tyler is right or I'm right. It doesn't matter from the standpoint of perspective of creation. I think it may come into a problem from the standpoint of if you think the evolution, that God didn't create the earth, because the scriptures say that he did. And I think that would be a potential problem for a believer to say that he didn't think that, because that really takes away from God's power position. I think I would have more concern about that. Again, I'm not the one that makes a decision on salvation on a single person in this world. And I would still say that there's other things way more important than that. However, I do think it questions God's integrity in the scriptures when you say that he didn't create it when it says that he did. Now, sometimes when it says create, it doesn't mean, the word actually isn't create. Sometimes, but many times about the universe it is. But there's other times where in the 7 days, some of the times it isn't create. It's basically to change or to make something different. That's what happens with the light in the first several chapters. It has nothing to do with creation, because the stars and everything were already there. And the way it's worded, it completely supports that. So hopefully that helps with that. Other questions? I see a couple of hands that want to go up. Yes? Right. Yeah, I think the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 stories I do not think they contradict. There's so many things in the Bible like that. When you hear different ways that things are worded, people immediately attack it. I do not think that's what's happening at all. I think it's just a different perspective from Adam and Eve's perspective versus in the initial the creation perspective. So I don't think there's contradiction at all with them. And people will do that with a lot of different words, like all the Gospels, where people say, well, this guy said this and this guy said that. If someone came in the room right now, jumped in here, ran around in a circle, and poked Taylor in the nose real quick, and ran over and hit Adam on the way out, we would all write a different story. And so I don't think it invalidates anyone's story. I think that they still can all be true. It's just that we would write different things that were important to us. Oh, he ran right by me. Man, oh, he looked like this. We would do that. They've done tests like that over and over again in classes where they've actually had people run in the classroom, do something crazy, run out, and he had people write what happened, and they read them and think, that's a different account. They're not telling the truth. But they all were. It just was a different perspective. So be careful with some of those things. I think it's just a different perspective from the two. That's my opinion. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
More of like a quick thought. By science back in like the 1400s,
Mm-hmm.
Cornelius, whatever his name was, or I forgot the dude's name.
Go ahead.
They did not know that the sun was the focus of the universe up until that point. Whenever that guy, whatever his name was supposed to be, I haven't been in school in 2 years. Whenever that guy got like thrown in prison for defying everybody and saying, "Oh no, it's a heliocentric universe, not we're not the center of everything."
Okay.
And I mean, didn't the Bible say?
Okay, so Sam brings up a point, and this is another issue which is really interesting. And the concept is the Bible, there was people for years who said that the earth is the center of the universe, basically, and things spin around the earth and all that kind of stuff. And we know that isn't true, and we think how foolish that was. You know, we have a lot more things than they do, and none of us figured that out in here, so don't be criticizing any of those people, number one. Number two is the Bible is amazing because it was doing the opposite. It talked about the earth being a sphere long before anyone knew. There's amazing astronomical predictions and facts that are in the scriptures, in the book of Job, in the book of Isaiah. There's a lot of different amazing things. And the Bible says that people overlooked for years and years, and then when they found out, they said, wow, it was right there all along. How did we miss it? So the Bible is amazing. The science stuff is incredible. There's a lot of amazing books to read. And that brings me, and there was one more question I was going to answer. But I use 3 books as a lot for this, but I use a lot of other books. This is called The Science of God by Schroeder. It's really good. This one is called Is There a God by John Oakes. It's really good. And I also mentioned this one, The Creation, Evolution, Controversy by Wysong is really good. There's so many good books to read on this. But if you want to know about it, you got to read it. And I didn't tell you very much of what I read tonight. Really, I feel like, man, I missed a lot. But there was one question that was over here. Who was it? Brent?
You're a pretty smart fella. You've been doing this Christian thing for like 37 years, and I'm assuming your opinion has changed a little bit over that 37 years. I just want to kind of point that out and say that a lot of times when we get in this kind of discussion, we get really bold about what we think. And you just preach to us, and then we take that somewhere with that same boldness, and that boldness may even change in you in the next 10. And when more science comes around, and when we start seeing scriptures come to life in different areas, and I just think it's important to kind of finish with that thought.
Okay. Brent brings up a really important spot. And I said stuff, and I tried to be careful, but I'm sure I said stuff that 10 years from now was going to be incorrect. That's the truth. I go back and think of some of the classes I taught on evolution for, I don't know, let's say 30 years ago. And some of the stuff I said then, I disagree with now. Okay? Because I've learned more. Science has learned more. And that's supposed to happen. And for those things, I feel like, man, that was dumb, but I was doing the best that I knew. And I think that the amazing thing is that don't ever be too arrogant about any of this stuff because none of us know very much. All right? And the second thing is, what I think is really important is what we do know as a fact is supported by the scriptures. But there's things that we're going to read about ages and times and fossils and floods and all this different thing that some of it I'm not even sure exactly which side of it I'm on in some of these beliefs right now about, for example, the flood and some of these other things like that. There's a lot of issues. I believe it happened. I'm not saying that. There's a lot of questions about specifics that I can argue both ways on. And I think that you have to make sure that you don't become One of the things that's hurt Christianity is being dogmatic about stuff that we don't know for sure. And then it gets proven false. So always be smart. Don't think you know more than you know. Use the facts that we have. Let's say next year they find 10 million transitional things. They say, well, God must, in my opinion, God's using some kind of transition, you know, because I see so many things he does. I like believing him, you know. But to me, the thing that's amazing to me is the complexity of life that has developed in really a short amount of time. And there, in my opinion, no matter what we find, it's going to be hard for me to ever believe that something could happen that good. It'd be like me walking out and a spaceship that just happened. It just showed up in my yard, but nobody made it. I think that doesn't really happen. I think life is more complicated. If a house showed up after a tornado went through an area and a brand new house popped in there and was sitting right there and said, that's the most beautiful house that's ever been made through this tornado, you'd say, that's impossible. That's kind of like life. It really is. It's actually, my house is way less complicated than a cell, than one. That cell has to eat, reproduce, move, get rid of waste. My house does nothing. It actually breaks down. And it was expensive, you know, and I thought it was going to be nice, you know. But the cells keep going. So there's a part of that that every one of us is going to say, wow, Chris was wrong on that. This is not the first time, all right? But if a scientist is honest, they're going to be wrong lots of times because none of us knew everything. And so you take the facts and you put it together in a way that you think this makes sense. And then you get more facts, say, no, that was wrong. It's this way. That's okay. Our brains are supposed to keep learning. God never said you get to 17, 20. Well, sometimes when I was 17, I thought I didn't know everything. But the reality is I didn't. And I'm 60 and I still don't know anything. You know, so be smart. Don't be arrogant. And that's love God, and that's read the scriptures. And please think on your own and read stuff outside. If you have questions about science, don't rely on me to know it for you. I'll do my best to help you. But you're going to interact with people. Learn it. Study it. It's fun, actually, to learn it. I did this, and it was refreshing in my faith, actually. I mean, I've done these talks before. I started going over this and said, God, it's amazing. And I think that's what you have to do. You look at this creation, we see it all the time. But can you imagine making this? It's unbelievable. So, yes.
Can you say the books again?
Yes. I'll do this, and then we're going to close up. The Science of God by Gerald Schroeder, Schroeder. Is There a God by John Oakes. Actually, John Oakes is one of my favorite apologetics writers of all. I love him as far as, he puts a lot of good stuff. Jacoby's really good too. And then The Creation Evolution Controversy by Weissong. Those are some really good books if you want to dig into. But guys, thanks for your attention. I hope this helps you. Let's honor God in all we do, and let's have a great Christmas service. Let's make it special.